Good afternoon, everyone. Firefighters from Detroit and across the U.S. and Canada are getting ready to bid farewell to three of their comrades.
They're the three Detroit firefighters killed in last Thursday's warehouse fire. The trio will be honored in a memorial service this afternoon at Cobo Hall. Right now, a motorcade is lining up outside Tiger Stadium to take the victims' caskets to Cobo. Al Allen is outside the stadium for this live report. Al?
Verge, let me explain it to you in one sentence. Never before in the history of the city of Detroit will you see such an event in downtown area. As a matter of fact, I've been covering stories in Detroit for over 17 years, and what's about to take place has never taken place before. 3 Detroit firefighters will be buried today, but there will be a memorial service. I'm standing here next to Tiger Stadium where the procession is lining up. On top, the first fire engine, I don't know if you can see it or not, is Lieutenant Paul Shimmick. He is on top of engine number 10. There will be 2 other bodies on top of 2 other fire engines behind me as well. The procession will then go down Trumbull Avenue to Washington Boulevard, down Washington Boulevard to the fire station for a brief ceremony, and then on to Cobo Arena for a massive funeral. Some 5,000 to 10,000 people are expected, and Sherry, as you mentioned before, firefighters from around the country and just about around the world are taking place in this spectacular remembrance of these 3 firefighters who died in the line of duty last week. Sherry, Verge?
All right, thank you very much, Al. Al Allen with a live report. That motorcade should be stepping off shortly. And, of course, Al will have a live report, a full report on the motorcade and memorial service tonight on Eyewitness News at 6. Sherry?
Well, as those fallen firefighters are laid to rest, fire officials think they may be zeroing in on a suspect in that tragic blaze. Police are holding a 38-year-old Detroit man for questioning. He was taken into custody over the weekend. No charges have been placed at this time. He's described as a vagrant. Earlier, investigators have reportedly believed teenage vandals may have set the fire. 2 other suspects were questioned and released on Saturday. We'll have complete coverage of the fire and today's memorial service tonight on Eyewitness News at 6.
Detroit firefighters were busy this morning battling a blaze at an abandoned factory near downtown. It happened at 2660 West Grand Boulevard near I-75. The factory was formerly occupied by Watson and Stark Steel Companies. There were no injuries in the fire, which started about 9:15 this morning. Firefighters spent about 40 minutes bringing it under control. Windsor fire investigators today are looking for clues on a 4-alarm fire which forced the evacuation of about 2,500 homes near a paint factory last night. The blaze at the McDonald and White Paint Company burned for about 6 hours before firefighters brought it under control. Residents were evacuated for 5 hours before being allowed to return home about 11 o'clock last night.
The fire was one thing, but we had to also take the chemicals into consideration for our people and the residents in the area. And this is what really our biggest concern was, along with the barrels exploding.
No one was seriously injured. The cause of the blaze is still unknown.
Firefighters. And one of the widows was sharply critical of the way the city handles abandoned buildings like the warehouse that became the deadly inferno. Channel 7's coverage begins with Jim Harrington.
3 funeral processions from 3 parts of the city. Firefighters from all over the Midwest converged on Tiger Stadium today. Here, the 3 funerals joined to form a processional to a Cobo Arena memorial service for the trio killed in last week's tragic fire. There were firefighters from New York, Windsor, Cleveland, and Chicago, from Warren, Lansing, Ecorse, and Birmingham. They came by the hundreds to parade down Michigan Avenue and to march past fire headquarters up Washington Boulevard. Firefighters from wherever have a kinship one with another and will tell you, we are family. They came for this final tribute to their fallen brothers, the veteran, the teacher, Lieutenant David Lau, a firefighter for 31 years looking forward to retirement. He leaves his wife Isabel and 4 grown children from a previous marriage. Larry McDonald, the rookie, a week away from getting his badge, a week away from joining 3 uncles and his dad, all Detroit firefighters. And Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, another veteran, always first on the scene as he was last Thursday, survived by wife Karen and 3 children. Captain Billy Blackwell worked at Shimmick's side.
Same way. They knew what they were doing. You look around, you pay attention to a lot of things when you're at a fire like that. And these men, plus Paul, knew exactly what they were doing.
If you hit a fire like that tomorrow, would you hesitate for a second, Billy?
We do the same thing, the same routine. Yeah. You've got to get in and stop it. You can't put it out and outside. It's something we all know that can happen anytime. It's just we pay the price every now and then. And we paid a terrible price this time.
The procession wound up at Cobo Arena for a memorial service. and a final farewell to Paul Shimmick, Larry McDonald, and David Lau. I'm Jim Harrington, Channel 7 Action News, reporting.
Nearly 6,000 people attended that memorial service inside Cobo Arena. Part of the program consisted of the playing of taps and a final salute to the firemen who will be remembered as heroes. It was here that the family members, friends, and comrades were able to hold a hand or lend an arm of support. One speaker after another made their way to the podium, each offering words of praise for the 3 fallen firefighters and their condolences. And there were also prayers, words of encouragement for the families, messages of faith, hope, love, and trust.
Life is a gift of God. No matter how long or how short, it's God's gift. It's how we use it, how we live it, how we spend it. Like great literature, there's the long novel, there's the short story. Both are great, both are lasting.
While the city paused to honor the 3 fallen firefighters, today was also a time for the widow of one of the victims to share with the city some of her feelings about the meaning of her husband's sacrifice. This morning, Isabel Lau contacted Channel 7's Eric Smith and told him she had a message for the people of Detroit, a message she wanted them to hear today, the day of her husband's funeral. Eric Smith with more.
The gray limousine seemed out of place in front of the modest East Side Detroit home where Fire Department Lieutenant David Lau lived, where he had raised his 4 now-grown children, where he had found a new life 10 years ago with a strong and impassioned woman named Isabel. His family was together again today, but there was little joy in the reunion, for they gathered in grief. Hundreds came to the Bethesda Missionary Temple to honor a faithful city servant, a teacher, and friend who was proud to claim the fire service as his calling, but his widow carried conflicting emotions. As she prepared to face the farewells, Isabel Lau's words bore the weight of a heavy heart.
I just wanted to relay to the city and Mayor Young that I cannot accept his condolences for the death of my husband, Lieutenant David Lau. I think that, and I'll tell you why I can't accept the condolences, because until the city does something for our civil servants who work so hard to save our lives, then all is lost. I hope something comes out of this tragedy. It is a tragedy. What do we have? I mean, we don't have a city that we can be proud of. Not the civil servants, not the people who live in the city that are forced to live in the city. I say to Coleman Young, if you are going to force us to live in the city, then make our city safe and sound so that we are proud to go home at night. We are safe to send our children out to play, to schools. What can I say? And to give them what they deserve.
Lieutenant Law's children, Peggy, a naval career officer, Jerry, a former firefighter, Curtis and Eric, all said they had lost their best friend. Isabel said the strength in her life is now gone, and says she will leave the city that her husband loved so well and served for nearly 33 years. Isabel Lau wanted to make certain that everyone understood that today she spoke not out of bitterness over her husband's death, but rather in the hope that something good will come out of it, something good for all of the citizens of Detroit. From the Northeast Side, I'm Eric Smith, Channel 7 Action News, reporting.
As the entire city mourned the death of the 3 of its finest servants, Detroit police homicide and arson investigators continue building their case against the man believed responsible for the fire. As Channel 7 reporter Chris Hansen tells us, charges could be filed against the suspect tomorrow.
As the warehouse ruins smolder today, 4 days after the fire started, arson and homicide detectives continue to hold a Detroit man in his 30s believed to be responsible. According to police sources, no clear motive has surfaced. There is apparently no evidence, however, that the man started the fire for any financial gain. Detectives are exploring the possibility the suspect is a pyromaniac. It was during the blaze Thursday this 61-year-old man was taken in for questioning about the fire. He and a 41-year-old man were held but released. Ironically, the suspect now in custody implicated the 41-year-old at the scene. That's when investigators became suspicious. Detectives still can't say what flammable material was used to ignite the warehouse. It's believed once huge piles of rags started on fire, smoke and other volatile gases collected, causing a flashover. A blast of fire which eventually consumed the Continental Supply Company next door. In the meantime, the suspect was scheduled to be given a lie detector test late today. Results were not available. As homicide and arson investigators continue to put together a case against the man they have in custody, Wayne County prosecutors have been told a warrant will likely be sought tomorrow for 3 counts of murder. At police headquarters in downtown Detroit, I'm Chris Hansen, Channel 7 Action News, reporting.
The last of the firefighters injured in Thursday's warehouse fire was released from the hospital over the weekend. And with the burial of their fallen comrades, the Detroit Fire Department now begins the long and difficult process of healing.
When firefighters in Windsor and Ypsilanti Township were pressed into action last night, the Detroit warehouse fire was clearly on their minds. A fire official in Windsor telling Action News he refused to send his men inside a burning paint factory because of the tragedy in Detroit. The fire at the McDonald and White Paint Factory forced the evacuation of thousands of area residents. Officials fearing that highly toxic gases would escape the plant site or that other materials might explode. Arson investigators were on the scene today searching for the cause of that blaze, which injured 6 people. An investigation is also underway today in Ypsilanti Township. Officials there are trying to determine the cause of last night's fire at the Washtenaw Country Club. As we reported, the fire destroyed the main building of that facility.
Had to pay their respects. At Cobo Hall, Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, Larry McDonald, and Lieutenant David Lau were called heroes. 2 of the 3 were buried in private ceremonies this afternoon.
Services were held for Lieutenant Lau today. He was buried this afternoon at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Detroit. 3rd-generation firefighter Larry McDonald was buried in the Cadillac Memorial Gardens in Clinton Township. Lieutenant Shemmick's funeral will be held tomorrow at St. Christopher's Church in Detroit. Today, firefighters from around the nation came to Detroit to pay their final respects to the fallen firefighters. News 4's Bob Pizer reports on the impressive memorial procession through the city.
They came from Muskegon in western Michigan, from New York and Ohio and 5 provinces of Canada, from Ferndale and from Florida. Nearly every badge was taped with black, a symbol that one of the family had died. But this time, it was 3. Lieutenant Paul Shimmick, 46 years old, who liked to fish in his spare time and cooked kielbasa at the firehouse. Firefighter Larry McDonald Jr., just 20 years old, the 3rd generation of his family to serve in Detroit. And Lieutenant David Lau, 58, a true veteran of the smoke and flames, who always stayed close to the rookies in his command. Their comrades came to be with them.
It's a feeling of camaraderie that we have with each other. And you can see around there's people coming from nearly all over the country here. And it's the day that we all get together to remember, more or less to remember our own.
When one man, whether it be in Detroit or Battle Creek, goes down, we all feel the loss.
The city's newest trucks were draped in black crepe, and the procession of cars began from Tiger Stadium to downtown, from 5 dozen cities across the state. In front of the main fire station, beneath cross ladders, the dead men's gear was laid out, recalling their work and sacrifice.
I just wanted to show my respects for the sacrifice they made protecting the city.
The city fathers joined the procession there and marched to a dirge to Cobo Arena as downtown workers and rank upon rank of uniformed firefighters saluted goodbye. A flyover in the missing man formation concluded the procession as 3 brave men came home to the city they died to serve. Bob Pizer, News 4, Detroit.
After the procession through the city, the tribute to the firefighters continued inside Cobo Arena. The caskets of Lieutenant Lau, Lieutenant Shimmick, and firefighter McDonald were carried into the arena by fellow firefighters. After a moment of silence and a reading from the podium, the mayor summed up the sentiments of a grief-stricken city.
All Detroit is grateful. The tenants that we have here around this nation and even beyond this nation is testimony to the fact that their brother firemen appreciate that sacrifice.
The mayor said the 3 men died courageous deaths. He also said we should not second-guess the firefighting tactics used last Thursday.
A total of 10 firefighters were injured in that blaze. Several of them...
A little bit then. But when you're in there, you're so busy doing your job, taking care of your brother, you don't have time to think about it.
Al Allen, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
On the city's northeast side forced literally dozens of people into the early morning cold. 3 units were heavily damaged, and officials say by fighting the blaze from the inside, they were able to get things under control quickly.
Taught, and that's what works, and that's what we do.
Go right at it, at the heart of the thing.
Right. There are accidents at times, but the majority of the times we put the fires out.
One resident remains hospitalized tonight after suffering minor burns and smoke inhalation. One firefighter was injured but was treated and released. And there's still no word tonight on what caused that fire at a Windsor paint storage building.
That's twice the normal amount of time they spend. Now, originally, these homicide detectives were planning to seek a warrant against this man with the Wayne County prosecutors. They did not do that. Instead, they came here to do the lie detector test. That's often done by investigators when they want to check on, find out which lead is better than the other. For example, 1,500 people were given lie detector tests during the Oakland County child killing. So basically what they've done here is given this man an all-day examination, and according to one informed police source, the polygraph examiners, quote-unquote, did well. What that means, I don't know. We will find out more tomorrow when arson investigators say they will probably hold a news conference. Reporting live from Northville, T.W. Chang, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
T.W., let me ask you this question. How solid a lead do they have in this particular suspect that they did not have in the previous 2 suspects?
Well, according to one informed source, and it's only one, and I have not been able to confirm this with any official channels, this suspect is much, much stronger than the other 2. The other 2, they were never sure. They questioned them at length, but they were never sure. This particular suspect, according to an informed police source, they feel much stronger about. And as I said, that one person close to the polygraph examination said, quote-unquote, they did well. Whatever that means, I don't know at this point. We certainly will find out later tonight and tomorrow.
Okay, and I'm sure you'll keep us abreast. Thank you. T.W. Chang reporting on a new suspect being questioned on that fatal warehouse fire. Bruce?
Well, the National Fire Protection Association, what they call the NFPA, is taking a hard look at that tragic warehouse fire from last week. As we reported exclusively here on Eyewitness News, a team of investigators is here to try to learn more about the fire. 2 engineers from the NFPA came to our newsroom today to view videotapes of that fire. They are looking at the way the blaze spread so rapidly and also the building construction as well as how the fire was being fought. The materials in the warehouse are also being probed.
Sufficient amount of fuel, yeah. If it was anything like the warehouse that is still standing and had a substantial amount of fuel load in it, stored rags and so forth.
A detailed engineering report will result from this field study they're doing, and other fire departments across the country will then get a chance to see the information that's been probed here.
Across the border, Windsor firefighters were probing a massive fire in that city. It was a blaze that caused the evacuation last night of 8,000 people and injured 1 firefighter at the McDonald and White Plant Company. Our Nancy McCauley tells us this evening as they comb the fire scene today, Windsor firefighters had their thoughts on Detroit's killer fire last week.
They boarded the buses quickly. A black band of mourning was worn across their badges to demonstrate sympathy and sorrow for their Detroit brothers killed in the line of duty. 400 firefighters from as far away as Toronto and Ottawa headed to Detroit to pay their respects. Some aboard these buses battled an extremely dangerous chemical fire here in Windsor last night at this paint factory. The men on duty today were not allowed to talk on camera, but told me that they had Detroit's tragic warehouse fire in mind as they worked last night. Chief Rainey Cecil explained that his people were not sent inside the building as they were in Detroit.
We've always had a policy in place here in Windsor that if we do have a vacant building totally involved, none of our people are to go in there to fight it from outside. Of course, even then, you never know really that something could happen. You never know what's stored in some of these buildings. And naturally, you have to deal with what you feel you've got at the time.
Is arsenic suspected here?
Hasn't been ruled out at this time.
This flag is flying at half-staff today outside this Windsor fire station. You know, there is a long history of cooperation between Windsor and Detroit firefighters that reaches back into the 1800s. One Windsor fireman told me today with tears in his eyes that no one can really understand the bond between firefighters unless they face possible death together every day. In Windsor, Nancy McCauley, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
Meantime, Detroit firefighters put their grief aside and they fought a fire on the east side. The careless use of a torch caused this fire this morning at an abandoned steel factory near downtown. That factory was once occupied by Watson and Sark Steel Companies. It took firefighters about 40 minutes to bring that fire under control at the scene near the 26,000 block of East Grand Boulevard. Fortunately, there were no injuries.
Why does the city administration allow a large number of potential fire traps to remain standing in Detroit? That is one of the questions raised in tonight's Perspective, and here's Joe Weaver.
Coleman Young should be on the hot seat with firefighters today. Last week he said raises for firemen and police officers could bankrupt the city's budget. Last week, 3 valiant firefighters died in the fire which started in one of the hundreds of vacant warehouses in the city. I raised the question then, who dropped the ball in city administration, which allowed that building and the many others to stand as potential death traps around the city? Ironically, today, another fire on top of an old building in a neighborhood of abandoned warehouses. I think Mayor Young is obligated to explain to his constituents, including firefighters and their families, why all these fire traps are allowed to stand and take the responsibility himself. The buck has to stop with the mayor. Secondly, last week's tragic blaze points up the real value of the men and women in Detroit's fire department. Mrs. Ella Robinson of Detroit wrote me a letter today saying that Coleman Young has the nerve to want to deny firemen and policemen a raise after he accepted a big one last year and gave council members all new cars. Well, you've hit the nail on the head, Mrs. Robinson. We need answers from the mayor on why those old abandoned buildings are allowed to stand and why he can't back his own firemen for moderate wage
The man
increase.
charged with starting the fire and murdering the firemen began his preliminary hearing. Our T.Y. Chang was there and has this report.
36-year-old Willie James Clemens showed no apparent concern during his preliminary examination today to determine if he should stand trial for arson and murder. First fireman to testify, Lieutenant Robert English, said, on March 12th, firemen responded to a trash fire at the abandoned warehouse at I-96 Service Drive in Hancock in southwest Detroit. He could see 2 separate fires. Then he said he heard a whoosh and a fireball swept through the 3rd floor. He tried to escape out the window when, quote, my right leg behind the thigh started to burn. He then saw Lieutenant Paul Shimmick fall from a window and land on his head. The next witness, truck driver Alex Smith, testified he saw the defendant run from the warehouse just before the fire started. Smith said defendant Clemens looked suspicious and was half running and looking back.
He saw the defendant coming out of the building, and he later on, after he had talked to the police, saw the defendant's picture on television.
He might have seen something, and he might have vaguely recalled that he saw something. But obviously he didn't see something clear enough and focus on it clear enough to say, wow, I know who set that fire, or he would have come forward earlier.
Willie Clemens' preliminary examination here at the 36th District Court will continue tomorrow. That's when investigators are expected to testify about his confession. A confession the defense attorney now says was mentally forced out of him. T.Y. Chang, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.